Welcome in. This is Always Talking Ball with Tyler Noe and Lance Barton. Right below me on your screen is a subscribe button. Do us a favor and click that. Right below Lance, there's a thumbs up button. Do us another favor and click that. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, as always, we thank you as well. And we thank you for making sure you're subscribed and following the podcast on there. We have a lot of new listeners that are just jumping back in because of football season, week 1, kicking off tonight. Thank you guys as well. But also, please share this podcast with a couple people that you know so we can continue growing this thing. And don't forget head over to homefieldapparel.com. Tomorrow, Friday, August 30th, they're releasing a brand new item for them, coaches' jackets. These things are perfect for fall wardrobe staple for game days, tailgating, much more. Each jacket has been thoughtfully designed with 1960s and 1970s vintage logos while maintaining the classic style of traditional coaches' jackets seen on the sidelines. They will be launching the jackets for over 60 schools and are anticipating these to be a crowd favorite. Lance, I sent you a picture of them. We saw them early, saw an early release of them. They're extremely sharp. Of course, we can get you 15% off by typing in ATB15 in the promo code section. You can also scan that QR code up in the top right corner of your screen, and it'll take you right to homefieldapparel.com. Pick out your coach's jacket, any other gear you might want. Type in ATB15 for 15% off. All right, Lance, we've got tons of games we're going to break down for week 1, and we're going to start with a big one in Atlanta. Top 15 matchup between Clemson and Georgia. Lance, let's get to it. What you got for us in this one?
Never thought I'd see these two brands matching up and first game of the year and it almost being a 2-touchdown line. So Georgia's favored by 13.5 right now over Clemson. And that just kind of shows where things have been for Clemson, the last few years. They've been a little down to the standards of what we saw with, those teams that Dabo's had with Trevor Lawrence and that crew, Deshaun Watson. But man, it's still seeing these two brands matching up in the Mercedes-Benz Dome there in Atlanta. It's going to be interesting, man. I'm just, again, on this, I thought something a little interesting nugget here was that Dabo, when he's a dog of 5 points or more, is 12-1 against the spread. Mm-hmm. So if you're a trend person, that's a pretty powerful trend there as far as, again, I'm not a huge trend person, but like you said, sometimes when you look at it and it favors one way or the other when you're trying to decide on a game. I mean, 12-1 against the spread as a dog or 5 points or more is pretty impressive.
Hey, I've got a trend for you. How about Georgia's won 39 straight in the regular season?
Yeah, it's pretty good. That's pretty good. I think their last loss, wasn't their last loss to was it Florida?
It's Florida in November of 2020. They haven't lost to anybody except for Bama since then. They're going for 40 wins in a row. Which, as we heard on Josh Pate's college football show, that if they get 40 in a row, that would match 1950s Oklahoma, which, they were, running through people like crazy back then. So it's just this game should be interesting to kick off. It's at noon on ABC. I think Georgia's 13.5-point favorites right now. And they're talking, Clemson, obviously, they're number 14 in the country still, so they're still, top 15 team. There's just, Cade Klubnik's second year, Garrett Riley's second year, blah, blah, blah. Kirby's in his 9th year, okay? I mean, he's just dominating. That's what he's doing. And very rarely do you see a team, Georgia team come into the regular season and to game 1 especially, and they're not clicking in some form or fashion.
Yeah,
I know we can all talk about that Oregon game a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, I mean, they waxed Oregon a couple of years ago, and they played this Clemson team a couple years ago as well in Charlotte. I think it was 3 years ago, and that game was 10-3. But again, they could have played that game. They could have played 12 quarters of football, and I don't think Clemson would have been able to score a touchdown against that Georgia defense. And that's kind of what I'm looking at here in this matchup this time around. Is Klubnik so far, what we've had to go off of. I mean, last year he was a turnover machine. He had 14 turnovers last year. And he almost had even more because he had several more fumbles that he didn't lose, but still he had 14 turnovers last year. I think the biggest mismatch in this game is probably the Georgia defensive backs versus the young receivers for Clemson. I know Clemson fans and Clemson overall are excited about these young receivers, but they're talented, but they're unproven. And there are dudes in the Georgia secondary, just like most Georgia defenses, that are going to be NFL first-round picks. Malachi Starks being one of them. So that's kind of a big mismatch in this game. Is I'm just wondering how Clemson is going to manufacture drives and get some points and be able to get explosive plays in the pass game, because normally against a Kirby Smart defense, you're not going to be able to manufacture and sustain long drives. You're going to have to be able to hit some explosive plays. And that's been a problem for Clemson the last couple of years. That was why Garrett Riley was brought in to begin with last year, and it still was a problem. I don't think that you're going to be able to line up and with Phil Maffa, and we've got a ton of respect for Phil Maffa here, and one of my favorite running backs in college football. But I don't think Phil Maffa is just going to be able to line up and run it down Georgia's throat.
Do you see any advantages in this game for Clemson?
I think Clemson's D-line is going to be nasty. I do. I think Clemson's D-line is going to be really good. I think Clemson can hold up. T.J. Parker and Peter Woods on that defensive front, I think they can hold up against the Georgia offensive line and the Georgia run game. And there's talks about Trevor Etienne. We don't know the status of him in this game. Kirby's playing it close to the vest like he always does, and says that pretty much around kickoff you'll know who's playing and who's not in this game. So Trevor Etienne might be out, might be suspended for a DUI charge that he had. If that's the case, Branson Robinson, who looked like he was made in a lab, like if you were going to create a player running back on NCAA football, that would probably be as far as looks wise, Branson Robinson would be who you'd create. And they've got a true freshman in Nate Frazier. He was out of Mater Dei, out of California, was like the number 2 running back in the country this past year. So they've got talented guys behind there. Dylan Bell last year ran the football for them some too when they had some issues, Georgia at tailback. So I don't think Georgia's going to have any issue there. But I mean, something else to keep an eye on here. Clemson's offensive line last year was not as good, but they bring back 4 starters off that offensive line, and they brought in Matt Luke, who also coached under Kirby Smart at one point. But Matt Luke is kind of like an offensive line guru, and that was one hell of a hire by Dabo. And so I'm intrigued to see what Clemson's offensive line is going to look like, because, again, it's perceived that the Georgia D-line is a big mismatch against this Clemson offensive line. But if Matt Luke can get that group improved a lot, you never know. It'll be interesting. I'm intrigued to see, what the Georgia receivers are going to be like against the young defensive backs for Clemson. Clemson's got young guys that are starting at corner. Again, very talented, but unproven. So I don't really see any major, when I try to find anything matchup-wise, like you said, that favors Clemson in this game, I don't really see any at all.
Okay. Well, Georgia, I mean, they're a sizable favorite, but what if Clemson goes in there, they go toe-to-toe for 60 minutes with the Dogs and maybe even pull off the upset?
I mean, obviously all the talk about Dabo and Clemson not being, whatever, that would be huge. I mean, that would be one of the most shocking results I think we would have in our early season, no doubt about it. And I think that it would be fair to question a little bit, what's going on with the Dogs? What's going on with Georgia?
Yeah.
But yeah, I would be beyond shocked if that happened. I do think that there is, I do think Clemson's defense, it's possible that Clemson's defense can keep them in this game a little bit and let them hang close. It wouldn't shock me at all if Georgia wins this game, 27-17, something like that, like a 10-point game. And it also wouldn't shock me if they blew the doors off Clemson, because, again, I just don't know how Clemson's going to be able to sustain drives on offense. And we haven't seen them yet with Klubnik create anything in the explosive pass game. So unless they do something that we haven't seen before, and it's a tough time to try to break that out against Georgia. Yeah. But here's the only problem. Here's the narrative that I want to just mention. We already can see it. Let's just say if what a lot of people think is going to happen in this game, let's just say if Georgia does clap those cheeks for Clemson in this game, what the narrative after the game is going to be, Clemson's still down, Dabo's lost, all of the trash talk about Dabo and Clemson and the transfer portal players and all of that. When in reality, the majority of teams in college football would also get their ass kicked by Georgia in the Dome. I mean, Oregon a couple of years ago, like that time you're talking about, later on in the year, They were a legit playoff contender until Bo Nix hurt his ankle and they lost. I think it was to Washington or somebody late in the year at home. They were a playoff contender at the end of that season. And, dude, they got blasted by Georgia in that first game. So, I mean, I don't think that if Clemson goes out and loses by double digits and gets, and Georgia wins comfortably, it doesn't make me think anything different really about this Clemson team. The only thing that would make me think different about this Clemson team, because I personally got Clemson winning the ACC this year. So them losing to Georgia in this game and getting beat bad is something I've already kind of thought was going to happen anyway. So if they play Georgia close in this game, that would get my attention. Obviously, if they were somehow to pull the upset, that would get everybody's attention. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on this. And I don't have a pick right now either way in this game, a best bet. If I had to, you made me lean one way or the other and throw something towards it, I'd have to take a shot. Even though that 12-1 as a dog or 5 points or more for Dabo, I'd have to take a shot at Georgia minus 13.5 here. There's no way I could go against Kirby and Georgia in a game like this.
This episode of Always Talking Ball is brought to you by Squad Blitz. The season is just around the corner, and if you haven't checked out Squad Blitz yet, now's the time. Squad Blitz is the exciting new college fantasy football app that lets you draft and manage your favorite college teams, not just players. It's a fresh take on fantasy sports designed to bring out the true strategist in you. Whether you're a seasoned fantasy player or new to the game, Squad Blitz makes it easy to jump in and start competing. The best part, you'll be joining a rapidly growing community of passionate fans just like you. So why not get in on the action? Download Squad Blitz today, invite your friends, and gear up for an epic season of college football. This is your chance to dominate the league and have a blast doing it. Squad Blitz, where college football fans come to play. All right, let's move on to the next game, 3:30, ABC. Big one going on down in Gainesville. It's the Canes versus the Gators. We've been looking forward to this one for a long time now. Florida listed as a home underdog in its opener against Miami. They've been a home dog once in their opener since 1990, and that was back in 2022 against Cam Rising and the Utah Utes, and a game which Anthony Richardson and the Florida Gators pulled off a 29-26 win to open the year. So spread comes in, Miami's favored by 2.5. You got storylines all over the place. Obviously, in-state rivals. You got Cam Ward, new quarterback, basically new defensive line for Miami. You got Damian Martinez, new running back. You got guys like Xavier Restrepo, they're back. Just a bunch of transfers coming in from Miami. And on the other side, you got Graham Mertz, who was a steady quarterback. Montrell Johnson does look like he's going to be available for the Gators on Saturday, so that's good news. Everyone's been talking about the Gators schedule and all that. Everyone's kind of ignoring that this is actually like a pretty solid roster, top 25 roster in our opinion. So what do you think on this game?
I mean, this is, I think Andy Staples labeled it the like the anxiety bowl or whatever, because the overreactions for whoever loses this game is going to be through the roof. And I mean, I just think this game, it's obviously it's very important for either team, but I just think this game's more important at the moment for Billy Napier in Florida, because if they were to lose this one with, like you already mentioned, alluded to, the rest of their schedule, it'd be tough, man. It's going to be tough to bounce back from a loss here at home to an in-state team like Miami. And look, we've already been talking about it with Cristobal, how he does less with more or whatever, but this is by far the most talented roster he's easily had down in Miami, and probably the most talented roster that he's had, including his time at Oregon. The defensive, both sides of the line of scrimmage are going to be so good for this Miami team. That's why that I was buying into the hype this year with them as far as having them in the ACC championship game. And I mean, they brought in 3 5-star interior defensive linemen. They added transfers with starting experience on the defensive line, like Simeon Barrow out of Michigan State and C.J. Clark out of NC State. Reuben Bain, who was a freshman phenom last year off the edge for Miami. He had 42 quarterback pressures last year, which only one person has done that in a freshman year like that in a long time, and that was Will Anderson at Alabama. And then the offensive line, they bring back multiple guys, starters. They brought in a center from Indiana who I think was at Michigan at one point before he went to Indiana. So Miami's got dudes. You already mentioned the skill position players like Ward and Damian Martinez, Restrepo at receiver. But I mean, this game being in the swamp is with the players also too, like the talent that Florida's got on this roster. I love the addition of Elijah Badger out of Arizona State to pair up with Trey Wilson at receiver. Trey Wilson again is as explosive of an athlete. I mean, he's like a Zachariah Branch from USC. That's the type of athlete this guy is at Florida. He gets the ball in his hands. He's electric as it gets. And this is year 2 in the Austin Armstrong experience on defense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, again, last year, you had a lot of guys that were thinking, a lot of guys that were trying to understand that new defensive system. I think year 2 in this system, they're going to be a lot better at Florida. And I just think this game being at home in the swamp like it is, I like Graham Mertz and this Florida offense and what they're going to – I think Miami's biggest weakness is their secondary, and I do think that is an area where Florida can exploit this Miami defense if they can give Mertz time with that nasty defensive line from Miami. And with Montrell Johnson possibly playing, I think that'll help a little bit as well. And I like Florida in this game. I do. We've called it out already. I did the thing a few weeks ago where I said, Miami fans, clip this. Yep. Florida ain't losing in the swamp week 1. They're not. And obviously I still believe that. So it is a best bet of mine. I've got Florida plus 2.5. And I'll probably sprinkle a little on the money line as well. But I think the line right now is 2.5. If you're someone that likes to take a look at buying it to 3 or whatever and sprinkling on the money line, do what you want. But the line's 2.5. I think Florida's going to win this game, so I'll take Florida plus 2.5 in this spot.
Yeah, I'm with you on the money line. I've already bet it myself. I got plus 125 on the money line. Cam Ward, we're big Cam Ward fans. We talked about him a lot last year at Washington State. We talked about him a lot in the offseason, kind of the saga of where's Cam Ward going to end up. Cam Ward last year was a little turnover prone, right? Mm-hmm. And you think back to that Florida State Georgia Tech game when Haynes King had trouble hearing, his sideline on the helmet communications in a neutral site, and Cam Ward has not been experiencing that in front of 90,000 people at the Swamp yet. And I think just a little miscommunication. I think the Florida Gators defense can make a couple turnovers, can cause a couple turnovers. And so look for that to maybe play a factor as guys kind of still wrap their heads around the helmet communication and all that. I just think, Swamp, 3:30, it's going to be hot. Obviously both these teams are in Florida, so they're used to the heat, but it's just this, it's the home field advantage in college football that everybody talks about. Mm-hmm. And Napier and those guys all off season long, all they've heard is how bad they are because of their schedule, right? And their win total is 4.5. They're not even expected to make a bowl because of the schedule. But game by game, individually, not as a collective 12-game schedule, but game by game, this team has the roster to compete with all these teams they're going to be playing.
And obviously Vegas thinks that as well with the line of plus 2.5.
Yeah, and it's just the compounding, effect of the schedule, and just week after week, you're just taking body blow after body blow. But game 1, we've had all offseason to prepare. These guys. I remember last year the Florida-Utah game, a lot of boneheaded decisions a lot of from Billy Napier, and they just didn't. They weren't good last year on the field. They just didn't seem prepared in that game, first of all. And it was a road game at Rice Eccles. We know how tough that's to play. But they weren't prepared. I remember they had guys wearing the same jersey on the same play on a 4th down, and Utah gets a first down and ends up going down and scoring the touchdown. It's just, I expect them to be a lot better prepared in the Swamp, and I expect them to come out, and I expect them to get the W. And again, I'm like you. I still got Miami going to the ACC championship game and winning the ACC championship and being in the playoff. So this doesn't damage them at all, but this is a big game for Florida.
Yeah, something else in this too is that, all the talk about Cam Ward this offseason, those weapons on the outside and on the perimeter for Miami. And we know Shannon Dawson, the offensive coordinator for Miami, has comes from air raid principles. That's where that's his offensive systems, what he came from. And I'm just intrigued to see on the road in a hostile environment like this with Damian Martinez and this offensive line, Miami should run the football to try to control the clock a little bit, to try to take the crowd out of it, and to set up the pass game for Cam Ward and those receivers. I just don't know, with, again, the excitement of Cam Ward and all the talk about that and Shannon Dawson's background, will they actually do that? Because I think that would be the keys to success for them in this game on the Miami side of it. I don't know that they will. But I said, I like Florida. I like Florida quite a bit in this spot here. So I'm with you, man. Plus 2.5. You got them on the money line. I'll probably sprinkle a little bit of that as well.
Yep. Let's head down to College Station. Talk a little college game day. They're going to be down there in Texas. It's going to be hot. I will be at this game. Notre Dame at Texas A&M. Again, if anyone listening will be there, DMS on X at AlwaysTalkBall. I'll meet up with you. We'll have a couple drinks. As far as the game itself, A&M comes in as a 3-point favorite. That's pretty much home field advantage. So they're saying these teams are even, on a neutral field. I mean, we all know the trenches are going to be interesting to watch, right? The outside the trenches, I mean, Elko, he knows Riley Leonard's tendencies. Riley Leonard probably knows a little bit about of what Mike Elko's defense is going to look like. He went against it in practice. A&M players should be a little familiar with Mike Denbrock's offense, right? Although he likes to cater it around each individual quarterback, so there's probably going to be some tweaks there. Yep. But again, he should be familiar with some of the guys on the A&M defense and certain tendencies they may have. And but yeah, everyone's talking about A&M D line. Everyone's talking about the world's going to get introduced to Nick Scourton. Obviously, Notre Dame. The news came out; they're probably going to have 2 freshmen and 3 sophomores on that starting offensive line. And that's 6 combined starts going into Kyle Field. But what if, right? What if Notre Dame, with those 6 combined starts on the OL, what if they go in there and they just push the Aggies around?
I'll be a little surprised if they just push them around. I think that
I will remind you. I mean, Ohio State last year, solid defense, and we saw Notre Dame have really good success running the ball against them. Again, Joe Alt, Blake Fisher, they were on the offensive line, right?
Yeah.
So, and we've said it all offseason, if Notre Dame, if they're ever going to have an issue, with a group, it's going to be offensive line because you trust Notre Dame to always kind of figure out the offensive line.
Yeah. I just, I mean, I don't know, man. I think that as far as the biggest mismatches in week 1, I think they're all over the place in this game. I think Notre Dame's secondary is a complete mismatch for Texas A&M's wide receivers. I think that Notre Dame's defensive front is a mismatch for Texas A&M's offensive line. And I think that A&M's defensive line is a complete mismatch for Notre Dame's offensive line. So I think in a situation like this, when you've got familiarity between coaching staffs and quarterbacks and things like that, like you do in this game, you've got 2 teams that's got 2 completely new offensive systems that are going against 2 teams that have very fundamentally sound dudes on defense for both of these teams. I think that you may see a situation here where these offenses are going to try to not turn the football over, settle in on this game, let their defenses play, and which O-line can hold up against the other team's defensive front, and which team can avoid the catastrophic mistakes, that catastrophic turnover. Because I think that's what's going to be the difference in this game. Because I do think the defenses are going to control this game, and it's just, again, the kind of the game within the game, the cat and mouse stuff between the coaching staffs in this game with, new offensive coordinator Colin Klein there at Texas A&M. Your first game ever as a coaching staff and with the Aggies and the offensive line and the offensive, new offensive staff is against this really good Notre Dame defense, and a very fundamentally sound, good Notre Dame defense. And vice versa. I mean, Denbrock's coming in with this young offensive line going on the road with 100-something thousand people. You said what if? What if Notre Dame's offensive line does push the Aggies around on that defense? Yeah, they're going to win the football game. Barring catastrophic turnovers, they're going to win the game. I just don't foresee that happening. I think both of these teams on defense are going to be able to control the game. I'm just intrigued to see if Colin Klein turns loose Connor Wegman, because I do think Wegman is legit. It's just a matter of, are they going to be able to turn him loose, and are those receivers going to be able to get open against that Notre Dame secondary? Because Notre Dame's got a top 5 secondary in the country with NFL players all over that secondary. I've actually got an official pick in this game and got a best bet in this game. I've liked it for weeks. I was a little sad that the line started ticking this certain direction, but there's some 2.5s out there. I'm sorry, man. I know you're going to the game, and I know you're a Notre Dame guy, but I'm going against him. I'm going with Texas A&M and Mike Elko's first game to get a huge W at home. I like the Aggies -2.5 in this spot, and I think they get a huge win for Mike Elko in his first game ever at Texas A&M. And I know there's some 3s out there too, but there are plenty of 2.5. So I'll take Texas A&M -2.5. Sorry, man.
I don't expect anything else from an SEC homer like yourself. But I mean, would you consider it an upset if A&M wins?
No.
Okay.
No.
That's kind of a debate going on, on social media today. It's an upset if, because they're favored in Vegas, but, obviously they're ranked below Notre Dame. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't consider it an upset because I don't think these teams are so far apart from each other. Maybe I'm way wrong. Maybe Vegas is way wrong on this one. They were wrong last week on games. Something that I thought was intriguing on this, just reading up on some of the the betting trends on it, is that I think 56% of action in this game is on Texas A&M, which means it's pretty even overall as far as the number of bets, but the amount of money is significantly lopsided. That over 80% of the money is coming in on Texas A&M. In this game. So that was something I thought was intriguing as well. So, but yeah, I like the Aggies -2.5 in this spot.
Okay. How about we move on to Country Roads, Take Me Home. A little West Virginia, Penn State. The Nittany Lions coming in as 8.5-point favorites, down from 10.5 a couple weeks ago. But yeah, Penn State of West Virginia, down in Morgantown. A little nugget here on James Franklin, right? The most profitable coach against the spread in games in August and September. He's 32-17-2 against the spread since he's been there. So, man, $100 better would have made you a lot of money there. But man, what if another what if for you? What if Andy Kotelnicki's offense isn't up to speed, right? What if Drew Aller looks the same as he did last season in big games? What if James Franklin coaches like he always has in big games, right? And Neil Brown gets the biggest win of his head coaching career, right? I mean, that's, again, we've said it all offseason. They're lucky this game's playing at noon. But, man, those West Virginia fans are still going to be pretty lathered up, probably from the night before.
Yeah. I mean, I got another what if for you on that. What if West Virginia does the same thing they did last year in all the big games they played in? The
38-15 loss to Penn State.
Correct. Yeah. West Virginia last year had 4 losses. In those 4 losses, they gave up 59 points to Oklahoma. They gave up 48 points. They gave up 41 points, and they gave up 38 points. That's an average of in the mid-40s per game that they gave up in 4 of their losses last year. And I know everybody wants to pile on Drew Aller and Penn State because of what they did in 2 games last year. But outside of those 2 games, Penn State averaged in the mid-30s of points per game outside of the games against Michigan and Ohio State. And I got a news flash for a lot of people. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier about Clemson playing Georgia. People are going to pile up on Clemson. If Clemson were to lose to Georgia, get beat by double digits or whatever, that's going to be the narrative after the game. When in reality, a bunch of people would also, at the same result, would happen, if not worse. A bunch of teams last year against Michigan's defense and Ohio State's defense would have looked really bad and would have not looked the same. Would have not been able to score points. So, I mean, this isn't the Michigan and Ohio State defense of last year that Penn State's going against in this game. But on the flip side of that, this is without a doubt one of the toughest openers that James Franklin and Penn State's had in James Franklin's career so far at Penn State. I know earlier he had a home-and-home deal with Auburn, but that was the Brian Harsin Auburn teams. That was not a good. Those were not good Auburn teams that they opened with. This is a West Virginia team that did win 9 games last year. You already alluded to it. The home atmosphere there is going to be insane. But again, when games are played matter. And this game not being at night is, I think, a really, really lucky deal for Penn State that this game was not at night. Us as college football fans,
I love Big Noon Kickoff, but it's ruining college football.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine because how well the games are spaced out this weekend.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're a West Virginia fan, I think obviously you want this game at night. But I'm just intrigued to see what Garrett Green, Jaheim White, and C.J. Donaldson. That 3-headed monster last year was a top 5 rushing attack in the entire country. They led the Big 12 in rushing last year. West Virginia brings back a good bit of that offensive line. They love their offensive line the way it looks like this year. But my question is not with the West Virginia offense. My question is with this West Virginia defense. What's it going to look like against a team that's got athletes like Katron Allen and Nick Singleton and Julian Fleming at wide receiver? What's it going to look like against an offense like that? And I can't wait to see what Andy Cottle-Nicky, do they ride out of the gate? Do they come out and try to make a statement right out of the gate and try to go up and down the field? We haven't seen a James Franklin offense like a team do that really since he's been there. We saw it a little bit with Trace McSorley and some of those offenses, but will they turn Aller loose and try to allow him to unlock that 5-star talent that he's got? But again, when you're on the road,
I think they're going to put Allen and Singleton on the field at the same time a lot.
Yeah, I do too, because we saw Cottle-Nicky do that at Kansas quite a bit. And again, his offenses, Cottle-Nicky's offenses, dating back to his days at Buffalo, he's always had a great rushing attack. So again, going on the road in a hostile environment with a crowd like that, the best thing you can do to help your quarterback out, to get him in a rhythm and to get him comfortable, run the damn ball.
Yeah.
And Penn State has obviously the Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. They've got the dudes to be able to do that. So if I'm Penn State, I'm pounding that rock and try to take that crowd out of the game and if you can do that, it could get ugly. Like I said, West Virginia got waxed in their 3 biggest games last year to Penn State, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State. So, I mean, while I would love to just call an upset here or whatever, I think a lot of people are doing that at the moment. I really don't know. I mean, if you made me lean one way or the other, I do think this West Virginia team is a good football team and is a dark horse in the Big 12 this year. It wouldn't shock me if they were able to keep this game close. And if it is close in the fourth quarter, you never know what could happen in this spot. But I just can't call an outright upset overall on this game.
Yeah, I just think if Penn State's for real, and if they're the team that should have made all of these would-be 12-team playoffs for the last 10 years, right? They come out and they make a statement on the road, and that's they win by double digits, and if they do, then okay, maybe it's a new Penn State team. So it's going to be a fun one to watch. A couple of dual screens there with that game and the Clemson Georgia game, both kicking off at noon. Let's touch on one more game, the one out in the desert with the Southern Cal Trojans and the Louisiana State Tigers. Lots been made about this game. These Sunday night games that they've been taking place for the past, 5-10 years on Labor Day weekend have been, for the most part, absolute bangers.
Yeah.
And LSU's been involved in a lot of them, right? Mm-hmm. They've been involved in a lot of Monday night Labor Day games, and obviously, Florida State the past couple of years, those have been really good games. This one is projected to be high flying because these defenses were subpar last year. We've talked about all offseason this game, them looking in a mirror at each other. Mm-hmm. And obviously they're, replacing their defensive coordinators. Their head coaches are, seasoned coaches, and they're top 5, top 10 coaches in the country. Quarterbacks are solid. Joe Sloan, new offensive coordinator at LSU. He's got familiar with Garrett Nussmeier, so that should go a long way. Obviously, Lincoln Riley's the quarterback whisperer. We saw what Miller Moss did. He's got weapons. The mismatches are wide receiver, USC wide receiver versus LSU's DBs, and then vice versa. Those LSU wide receivers they brought in, like Kyron Lacey and CJ Daniels and those guys, versus the DBs for USC. Over the last decade, go ahead.
I was saying the biggest mismatch, in my opinion, of the entire weekend, of all the games, all the marquee games this weekend, is the ones we're talking about, is LSU's O-line versus the USC D-line. I think that, again, Cole Kubelik said that LSU's O-line is probably the best in the country going into this season. So I think the biggest mismatch, period, of all the marquee matchups this weekend is LSU's O-line versus defensive front for USC.
Yeah.
I love Will Campbell. I love Will Campbell's quotes, bro. Did you see the quotes that he had offensive tackle talking about that? Like, we're not going there to go to Caesar's Palace. We're going there to show up for a street fight. Exactly. And talking about how they're going to run them, pound the rock with that LSU run game. That he doesn't feel like that his running backs get a lot of respect. And they've got some like heavy tailbacks in that backfield this year at LSU. They got some big dudes in that backfield. Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson are going to be the main two toting the rock for LSU, and they're both like big tailbacks. So big offensive line with some big tailbacks there. I think that LSU is going to try to pound the rock.
Here's my last what if for you.
Mm-hmm.
What if we turn on the TV on Sunday night and 9:30, 10 o'clock Eastern, this thing's a defensive slugfest?
I would be beyond shocked.
Yeah.
I'd be beyond shocked. I don't see how that's possible. I do think that, but just by schemes alone, these defenses are going to be better this year. They're probably going to improve throughout the year as well because of who they brought in as coaching. Both staffs, like USC staff overall on the defensive side, not just DeAnton Lynn, but their staff overall that they brought in. They got some really good coaches on the defensive side of the ball now. LSU, same thing. It's not just Blake Baker. I mean, Corey Raymond back as a DB's coach, and Bo Davis back as a D-line coach. I mean, they've got some really good, like a lot of brain power on the defensive side of the ball now. So I think that by schemes alone, they're going to be improved. But again, this will be another one. After this game's over with, if LSU does light it up against USC, or they both light it up against each other, everybody afterwards are just going to overreact and talk about how these defenses still suck or whatever. But guess what? Who's stopping USC, really, in Lincoln Riley? Nobody really is. Nobody really has in Lincoln Riley's career. Like, who was stopping LSU's offense the last few years? Nobody. And so, I mean, that just drives me crazy how people just run with it on narratives like that after games. But again, I think that the biggest mismatch in this game is the LSU offensive line and running backs and the run game overall for LSU. We talked about the receivers against the DBs for USC. I like Garrett Nussmeier, and I know he hasn't played like a ton of football in the time, but he's played a decent amount and played in some like big moments and big games for LSU. And I like LSU in this spot. I do think USC is going to be able to score, but with a line right now at -4, the Sharps, I'm going to be honest with you, the Sharps are coming in on USC right now. But that's fine. I still like LSU in this spot. I like them -4. I do think that on the defensive side that the defensive line for LSU and Harold Perkins at playing off-ball linebacker again, I think that they have the capability of getting more stops overall. I think that they can play more keep away from USC's offense by running the football and running the clock. So I'll take LSU -4 in this spot as one of my best bets of the weekend.
I'm with you. I'm on LSU -4. I guess I'm an SEC homer too. What do you know? But, over the last decade, obviously Lincoln Riley's been there a couple of years, but over the last decade, USC is 5-26 straight up and 10-21 against the spread as an underdog. It's the worst against the spread win percentage among any school with 30-plus games as a dog in that span, which 125 schools have been, favored by or underdogs in 30 games since then. So it's ticked down a little bit, from 6, like you said, 6.5 to 4. I'll gladly take the LSU -4. I just think the physicality of the SEC is going to be bigger, big advantage for LSU. And the other stuff, skill positions and all that, I think it'll even out. But the physicality, and I trust Brian Kelly more than Lincoln Riley, to be honest with you.
Yep.
So, but yeah.
I know LSU's had some trouble in some of their openers like the last few years and stuff, but still, I think that too is getting their attention in this spot as well. The fact that they've listened to that a lot off season, how they've been dropping games in like the first games of the year. But that's a stat that's fine that you're saying that, but that was against Florida State, a really good Florida State team the last 2 years, the best Florida State team we've seen in a long time last year. So this one's one of the ones I'm looking forward to the most, man. That LSU USC game. That's going to be exciting. That's going to be a great spot for it to be in. And I know we love home atmospheres and all that, but if you're going to have a neutral site spot, like might as well light it up in Vegas like this. That's cool.
Okay. Is it time to sound the alarms?
Sound the alarms, man. That one of everybody's favorite segments.
Let's sound the alarms. It is upset alert time. Now, this year, these are bets that are only going to be given out on the pod. So you got to make sure you listen. We're not going to tweet these out or stuff. So, if you miss out on some of these upset alerts, some of these big dogs, that's your fault for not listening. So I'm going to kick us off. I've got 2 of them. And the first one I'm going to go with Georgia Southern getting 13 points at home against Boise State.
Okay.
Clay Helton got a bad he got a bad rap at USC, even though he won 9 games. It's his last year and won 10 games a couple of years, and he just got a bad rap at USC. And Boise State, this is all I got on this game. Boise State's traveling across the country, right? From Idaho all the way to southern Georgia. And Boise State has been seeing their logo and their name touted around a lot, right? They've been hyped up all off season. They've been the G5 rep in most of these college football playoff brackets that we've seen. Any idea who Boise State has on deck next week?
That would be the Quack Attack, the Oregon Ducks.
They got Oregon. I think it's next week, either that or it's in 2 weeks. But they got Oregon on deck, and you're going down to Georgia Southern, playing a Conference USA team, right? Or is that Sun Belt?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think it's Sun. I think it's Sun Belt.
I think it might be Sun Belt. But they're giving
about 100
points.
degrees.
Yeah. So we're gonna take. I'm gonna take Georgia Southern to cover and pull off the upset there.
Okay.
And the other one I got is the old Rainbow Warriors.
Ooh,
Hawaii.
Okay.
Plus 14 at home.
Sean Foster's first game
against UCLA. And this is a trend. They're on a trend that I will mention later. Okay, I'll get to that later in some of my official picks. But I think Timmy Chang, he saved some stuff back last week. I think he was very vanilla last week in that game against Delaware State. And again, like you just mentioned, Deshaun Foster's first game as coach. It's a tough trek. I know it's only LA to Hawaii, but still, 5 or 6 hour flight. UCLA is traveling a lot of miles this year, so they're going to get used to these flights. But it's a week 0 team, a team that played in week 0 playing against a team that hasn't played in week 1. Again, that's a trend I will mention later. But those are 2 teams that I'm putting on upset alert. I'm putting Boise State on upset alert, and I'm putting UCLA on upset alert.
All right. Well, I'm going to do one that's going to sound contradicting to what I said a little bit ago in regards to Penn State, West Virginia. But I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit here as far as upset alert. I'm going to put James Franklin and Penn State on upset alert because I do think that this spot, that atmosphere, the team they're playing against in West Virginia with that offensive attack there with Garrett Green, Jaheim White, and C.J. Donaldson, I do think it is a tough spot to be breaking in a new offense and a new scheme on the road like that. So West Virginia plus 8.5. I'm putting Penn State, like I said, on upset alert in this spot. It's not an official pick or like a best bet or anything like that, but we're looking at teams that who qualifies for upset alert are teams where the line is at least plus 4 or more. It's got to be more than 4 points or more. And there's not a ton out there this week, to be honest with you, that qualify for this. I thought about Wyoming +7 out in the desert at Arizona State, but I decided to stay away from that, and I'm taking the low-hanging fruit here for mine. For my upset alert is West Virginia +8.5 with a chance to win this game straight up.
Okay. Best bets time. I've already mentioned I'm on LSU -4, Florida +125 on the money line. Another one, I'm going to back you in the previous podcast and take Minnesota +110.
We
on the
rolling
money
that
line.
boat together?
Yeah, I got to have something on this Thursday action, and it's not going to be on Colorado. So I'm going to take Minnesota.
All right.
But another one, so the trend I was mentioning just a couple minutes ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
FBS teams that did not play in week 0, playing against the team that did, FBS teams that played in week 0 that are playing against a team on their first game, 60-34 against the spread. That's almost 64%, including 4-1 against the spread last season. So, who played in one of the biggest games and had the biggest upset of the week 0 last week?
Georgia
That's the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. And they're flying 4,000 miles back home to Atlanta, and they're playing an in-state team in Georgia State, who I know for a fact is in the Sun Belt. And, that 4,000 miles, that's nothing for ACC teams these days, But Georgia State, I got them at +21.5. 3 touchdowns and the hook. I just think they can keep it close. Georgia Tech has much tougher games. They're also coming down from the high of, winning that game, upsetting Florida State. I know Brent Key, he's going to have his guys focused as much as he can, but they're still college students. They're still young guys. And I think that Georgia State, obviously having a lot of in-state guys too, they'll be up for the game. And, you don't play week 0. You get to see a little bit of guys on a little bit of film on some of the team you're going to play. You get to hold some stuff back, that you didn't have to play. Maybe Georgia Tech used, some of their stuff. We'll just see kind of how, going over to Ireland, coming back, playing an in-state team, how that treats you. But I'm going to back the trend here, and I'm going to take Georgia State +21.5.
Little nugget I'll throw on top of that is too, last year, this Georgia Tech team, they went down to Miami, beat Miami. They beat North Carolina. They played Louisville off their feet. They played Georgia to the wire off their feet. And they got their butts kicked by Bowling Green in a trap spot last year.
Yep.
So as far as spot is concerned, you can't get much better in a spot.
Yeah.
In that spot there. So I don't have any say either way, but I do think that's a very interesting spot. And that trend you just said is intriguing.
Yep.
So I already gave out LSU -4. I gave out Texas A&M -2.5. I gave out Florida +2.5 against Miami. I might sprinkle a little bit on the money line in that spot as well. For Thursday night's action, I've already got Colorado -9 against the Bison. And I already gave out on our previous episode Minnesota. So we're both on Minnesota getting points there against North Carolina. At home, row the boat. And so the next one I'm going with is I'm going to take a look at Syracuse -17 at home in your boy Fran Brown.
Love the orange.
Yep, your boy Fran Brown's first game against the Ohio U Bobcats. And Ohio U is normally a solid squad in the MAC, but they're one of those teams that just got destroyed by the transfer portal.
Frank Solich ain't walking through that door.
No, he's not. He's not, man. He's not. And Curtis Rourke, he quarterback at Ohio. He's at Indiana now. They lost like 26 players that played significant playing time for Ohio U to the transfer portal. Not only that, but they lost a ton in the spring portal, like post-spring ball, people they thought was going to be on their roster. So they're starting a lot of new guys this year, and it's a MAC team. So, it's not like Miami, Ohio, where they've got a bunch of guys coming back that's played a lot of football or whatever. So, Syracuse, the opposite of what I just said. They brought in a ton of big-time players from big Power 4 programs all over the country with this new revamped recruiting staff that Fran Brown has hired around him. Kyle McCord, who was a quarterback at Ohio State. I love them getting a guy of that talent. I know people like to pile up on Kyle McCord. Look, he may not have been great. He was fine, serviceable, and fine, more than serviceable. He was fine at Ohio State. Yeah, he just wasn't C.J. Stroud. Okay, I get that. But he is a big-time step up for Syracuse to get a guy of Kyle McCord's talent to be the quarterback there. Rondé Gadsden, who had over 1,000 yards receiving 2 years ago, as he's kind of that hybrid tight end, wide receiver type guy. He's back. They brought in a big-time transfer wide receiver from Colorado State that's explosive, that can take the top off the defense. I just think this Syracuse team is going to be interesting this year in the ACC to begin with. So I'm going to take a shot here at Syracuse minus 17 versus the Bobcats. I think the Orange get it done and win by 3 touches, 3-touch plus in this game.
Love it. I've got one more for you. It's another trend, and these trends, they may not mean a whole lot, but in a week one where I don't see a lot that I love on the board, I got to make the board love me, right? So, same trend that I mentioned with the Georgia State Georgia Tech game, but better, right? Teams making their season debut against a conference opponent that played in week 0 are 14-3 against the spread, which is an 82% clip, which is why I'm taking Boston College plus 16.5 against Florida State.
And that line continues to fall.
It does.
Yeah.
And, a little bit of a hangover might be in store for Florida State. We still don't trust DJ. And I said after last week, I'm never backing him again. And so I'm going as far as to go against him this week. And again, Boston College didn't have to play. They've still got some tricks up their sleeve. They're going to want to go in and take advantage of a Florida State team that's down and probably a little discouraged after starting the season top 10 and losing their first game.
Bill O'Brien.
And they got a little crafty coach themselves, Bill O'Brien. He's coming in back to Boston, where he spent so many years with the Patriots. And I just think their offense obviously is going to be better just because Bill O'Brien's there. And 16.5 points, I think, is too much. I really wish that I obviously would have gotten it at, 22 or 23. But, beggars can't be choosers, and I'm going to go in direction of the line. And so I'm going to take Boston College plus 16.5. So I got Georgia State plus 21.5, Boston College plus 16.5, Florida money line, Minnesota money line, and LSU minus 4. I'm taking 4 dogs this week.
Okay, dogs. The underdogs might be howling this week for you, man.
Let's hope they bark in week 1, baby.
Yeah, dude. I wanted to give out a little trend that I just should have mentioned a minute ago with Syracuse, since we're throwing out trends here. Syracuse is, they're 17-point favorite against Ohio. And I'm back in Syracuse minus 17. Since year 2000, the Orange are 37-0 straight up and 25-10-2. 25-10-2 against the spread when listed as a double-digit favorite. So they are very profitable in this exact spot. So, again, if you like trends, that's one to take a look at there.
Crazy part, they've only had 37 games in 23 years where they've been double-digit favorites.
Exactly. I was going to say, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, the Qs get happy.
Must be post Donovan McNabb era.
Yeah, they get fired up when they get somebody in that they can beat up on. And I think
old JMA wireless dome, or carrier dome as we like to call it, is going to be hopping.
Exactly. And I think Kyle McCord may find playing against this Ohio U defense a lot easier than playing against some of this Big Ten defense, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, we saw what he did last year against a defense like Western Kentucky, and obviously skill position players are different, but I think they put up 63 against Western Kentucky. So
right. And like I said, there's some guys who said Syracuse got some dudes on the outside. They've got some athletes. So I'm intrigued to see what they can do. But a little recap here on mine. Like I said, Syracuse minus 17. I've got LSU minus 4. I've got Texas A&M minus 2.5. The Gators in the Swamp, Florida plus 2.5, and I'll probably sprinkle a little on the money line there as well. And I've got the Buffs and Coach Prime in Colorado minus 9 on Thursday night, and Ski-U-Mah row the boat, Minnesota, the Gophers getting what is it, 2.5, something like that now.
2.5.
Yeah, I got the Gophers getting some points against North Carolina on Thursday night. And again, follow us on our social medias, guys. There's times that, like, this, when we're recording this, we may have others that we put out between now and Saturday. We may not, but check us out on Instagram. Check us out on X, TikTok. And again, make sure you follow us on all of the platforms where you can get this podcast: Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Hit subscribe on YouTube. Check us out.
Yeah, week 1's finally here. Starts tonight, Thursday night. Watch Colorado, watch North Carolina, Minnesota. See how everyone looks. Continues Friday, continues Saturday, Sunday, Monday. 5 straight days of college football. We're back, baby. 2024 season in full effect. We appreciate you guys listening. Like Lance said, follow along on everything, and we will see you next Tuesday. Monday's Labor Day, so have a happy Monday Labor Day. Our episode will be out on Tuesday next week, recapping all of week 1, and I'm sure a lot of overreactions. So, again, until next time, we'll see you later.